Hello and welcome back to Tony Northeastern. It's been a while since I uploaded a video. Now decided to put some lighting into these teak coaches. Right, here we are at the bench. As you can see, I have now taken the first coach apart. This is going to be the experimental one. It came about quite easy. As you can see, the main frame, the body doesn't cover the main frame. So when it's on, you've got a very fine line to get your glue spatula through to pop it off. I started in the middle. I managed to get one in the middle, and I got one in the middle on the other side, and then worked it up towards the end, and then the end popped out. And then I worked it up to the other end of the coach, and the other end popped out, and they came apart relatively easy. And yes, so the LEDs I'm going to be using. Picked these up from Aldi's for $7.99, and it's a 3-meter strip. It's 230 volts reduced down to 12 volts. So this is the actual strip, and what I'm going to do, I'm going to experiment first to see if this works. So I'm going to make up one as if though it was going to go in a coach and test it. Add a resistor on the positive side. The arm marked up negative and positive on there, and this is the actual line where you can cut them to length. You can cut them on there to length, but you'll have to remove the silicone that they're in, scrape it back to solder cables onto. Done a little bit of an experiment. Obviously you know that this layout is DCC, and as you can see, the LEDs are quite bright, and the light actually runs along the silicone that's covering the LED, so it makes it even brighter. So I'm going to have to add a resistor to tone it down a bit, and we'll see how much it tones it down by. Oh yeah, that's a lot better. So I think that would be ideal for the coaches. Okay, as you can see, I've made the first one up ready. I've used the original connections to the LEDs, but on the next one I'm going to have to trim back the silicone and solder it onto these. I'll just give it a final check to make sure it still works. Yep, and it still works. Another good thing about this 3-meter roll of LEDs is it has a backing tape on it. So we're going to see how well that adheres to the roof. Let's see how we're going to fit these cables. There's a hole there, which is handy, but I can drop the 2 cables through into there, and hopefully there's a gap between this piece and the chassis to run the other cables to the far side, so I'm using both pickups on this. Do that. I should just lift off. There we go. Oh well, that's handy. Right, the pickups come straight through the main chassis, and looking at the space we've got, we can run cables from this one to that one, and then from that one up to the LEDs. Right, these air vents on the top of the roof here, if you flick it over to the inside, don't know if you can see it now, but I've managed to remove them. But there's little bits of the actual moulding coming through the roof. How I got rid of them was to little bit of sandpaper wrapped around a glue applicator stick and just finishing it off nice and smooth, just to make the LEDs adhere to the roof that little bit better. As you can see, I have now stuck the LEDs to the roof. The adhesive is quite strong, but I've also used a couple of tiny touches of amounts of super glue, really tiny amounts of super glue just in case, but that is quite firmly stuck down in there now. Well, that's handy, that's a good thing. The plastic moulding inside is not touching the LEDs, so that's good. So now once I've put the cables onto the chassis, that's ready to go back together. Right, I have soldered the cables to both bogies, so I'll get pickups from both bogies to operate the lights. If you've noticed, I've left a little bit of slack on the cables just to allow movement, and little bits of blue tack just to hold them in place. The cables will fit along in between the gaps between the tabs for locating onto the body and the weight here. So the next thing to do now is to solder the main cables for the LEDs onto these two here. Another thing I've done is I've opened up the hole to allow extra clearance for the cables coming down to meet up with the bogie. The idea now is to feed those two cables through there. Because of the screw fixtures here, you have to feed the cables through and solder them onto the bogie first, which is going to be quite tricky. As you've noticed, I've changed the cables over to colour code them so I know exactly which one's the positive and which one's the negative. So the red one will go on this side and the black one will go on this side. Right, now it's important to tin the cables just to make easier to solder on the new ones. Okay, I have now placed it on the track and the lights were working. It seems to be pulsating. I'm not sure why that's doing that. Whether it's the way the power is being fed to the track as it's digital. But it doesn't happen on the Pullman coaches I've got, so I am not sure about that one. The body's not fully fixed yet because I'm waiting for some people to go inside. For under a couple of quid a coach, it's worth it, I think. Yeah, as you can see, the buffer stops are doing the same. If you look really closely, there's a little flicker there. So it must have something to do with how the current is being put to the track. But hey ho, I think I can live with that. The corridor ones are going to be a little bit more trickier to do because the hole is right inside the toilet compartment, and you've got a little bit of detail in the toilet compartment, and which you're never ever going to see because the windows are whitened out. So right, I've prepared this one. I've learned quite a lot from doing the first one, so I've pre-tinned the pickups here and put in little bits of blue tack ready to take the cables. I've colour coded the cables this time, and I've used thinner cable just to help out with the ease of fixing them and soldering them. Okay, I have learnt my lesson off the last one, and I have soldered them on first before attaching the LEDs to the roof. Any excess cable I will stick into the toilet there. So that will work out just fine, I think.
Lunch is ready.
Lunch is ready. Right, I've fitted the lights to the coaches. I've left the bodies off because I'm waiting for some passengers so I can glue them in before I put the bodies back on. Okay, as you can see, I've coiled the cable up ready just by wrapping it around this glue spatula, and then that will tuck in there nice and neatly when I come to put the body back on. Right, I have received some sitting down figures for my carriages at long last, and I am slowly putting them into the carriages. Some of these I have repainted, but mostly they'll be going straight out of the box and straight into the carriages. I've got lots of little legs lying around where I've been chopping the legs off to make them fit into the carriages. Right, I have just finished adding the people into these coaches, and in the baggage compartment there you can just see there are some trunks and some suitcases, maybe a mail sack as well, and it really finishes off the coaches now with the people and the lights inside. So it's taken me a while to do this, and as you can see, it does look fairly impressive. So now we shall see the train running around the layout. Right, thank you for watching Tony Northeaster, and I hope you've enjoyed what you've seen. And it certainly is a cheaper way of lighting your coaches. And see you again next time. Bye.